I've come here to visit the place where Lance Corporal Erich Dorusch fell 80 years ago. And his story needs to be told because it illustrates the essential pointlessness and destruction of war.
For any Americans watching this, Lance Corporal is British for private first class. Erich Dorusch was born in 1906 in Silesia, now part of Poland. But as a farmer, he wasn't drafted until 1942, by which time he was already in his 30s. Germany was hurriedly trying to build the Wetterau-Main-Taube line, also known as the Little Siegfried Line, a series of defences running from the Wetterau region down to the rivers Main and Taube, although only the middle section was ever completed. The idea was to block advancing troops and prevent them from cutting Bavaria off from the rest of Germany.
At this point, the line happened to run along the edge of this forest, and this is where Dorusch was stationed when the unthinkable happened.
We're between the towns of Kleinwallstadt and Elsenfeld, and you can still see the remains of some of the bunkers that were built. Now, obviously, these trees have grown up around them after the war was over, but the reason they're in this state is that they were systematically destroyed by American troops.
The technique was quite simple and very effective. Lay enough charges to literally blow the roof off, flip it over and bring it crashing back down onto the bunker itself.
The idea was that anything built by Hitler was to be demolished, but not every single bunker suffered that fate.
And this is one of the very few that survived intact. It's bunker 224. It's a little way away in Nilkheim, which is a neighbourhood of Aschaffenburg. And the reason this one survived is that it forms part of a loading ramp for a railway.
These days, only a small section of the line is still operational and it no longer carries any passenger services. Even the loading ramp is no longer in use, but that is what saved the bunker, which has recently been restored and is occasionally open to the public. It was here to help to defend this railway bridge. And to be fair, the bridge did survive the war, but that was a problem for the Germans. Advancing American troops were able to cross the river on this bridge and take Aschaffenburg itself. By 1945, Germany had basically already lost the war, but the regime wasn't prepared to accept defeat and, in effect, ordered everyone to fight to the death. Lance Corporal Dorusch and his comrades had been driven all the way back from the Saarland to the Little Siegfried Line, which they were ordered to defend. And that's where they were on the 28th of March, just a little over 1 month before Germany surrendered.
Basically, American tanks came rolling through here on their way south from Kleinwallstadt.
Against this onslaught, the Germans were armed with rifles and one anti-aircraft gun. Nevertheless, they opened fire on the tanks. The Americans responded, as anyone could have predicted, with a barrage of shells.
It seems that one of the last shells that was fired by the Americans exploded in the trees here, and a piece of shrapnel went straight through Dorusch's helmet and head. His body, along with 2 others, was found by some local boys the following day, and they were given a simple burial in the local cemetery. But that wasn't quite the end of the story, because there was still the question of exactly who this was.
Since it hadn't been identified, the body was buried with a description of the injury. It was common for women at the time to try to claim a war widow's pension, and to that end, a certain Frau Mühlhaus falsely stated that the body was that of her husband. Not until 1950 was the real widow able to find some of Dorusch's comrades who were able to shed light on what had happened to him, and the body was finally identified. It was exhumed and now lies in a cemetery near the family home not far from Schweinfurt. Meanwhile, Frau Dorusch constructed this memorial where her husband fell.
This memorial is maintained by a local historical society, but not in order to glorify war. In fact, the society is very clear that their intention is to highlight the inhumane senselessness of war and to urge us to work towards peace.
All over Germany there are reminders of the destructive power of war. But Erich Dorusch serves to illustrate the insanity of the last months of this particular war. For Germany, the war was over. Germany's military was falling apart and no match for the combined might of the American, British and Soviet armies. Yet still, at the insistence of a clearly delusional leader, the regime was throwing farmers, children and old men into battle, exhausted, unprepared, and with only rudimentary weapons. Dorusch and countless thousands of others needn't have died if only their leader had simply accepted the inevitable.
Now, I know I don't have to tell you this, but just for the sake of completeness, I'll say it anyway. When visiting places like this, the golden rule always is to leave nothing but footprints and take nothing but photographs. And this goes doubly for the places I've shown you in this video, because these are not simply lost places. They are memorials, and they have a very serious message for us all.